So today we're going to go through PanIntelligence for Sage 200, part of our Innov8 Insights sessions. So we're going to just deep dive into the the product a bit, look at what it can offer to businesses that are using Sage 200, and get a bit more insight into the solution itself. I'm joined this morning by Stephen George Powell from PanIntelligence, and he's going to take us through the demo of the system when we get into that. But before that, I'm just going to take you through a bit of information about the solution itself. So, what is PanIntelligence then? So PanIntelligence is effectively an embeddable, no-code business intelligence application that allows you to effectively get insights and reporting out of the data that you've got in Sage 200 with little to no hassle. Doesn't necessarily have to be built from the ground up specifically for you, and therefore it's quite a cost-effective solution compared to others out there on the market where you'd have to start with nothing and build the solution from scratch. It's got some functionality already built for Sage 200, which we're going to look at today. And in terms of PanIntelligence as a company, it's what they do. They were a fintech company initially, working kind of in the financial services sector, and then broke off, and PanIntelligence was born as the kind of data reporting and insight side of that. So what is PanIntelligence, or Pi as we're going to call it? So it's a 3-in-1 solution. It is Sage certified. They've seen the solution, they've rubber stamped it, and it is the only BI app offering true plug and play visual reporting for Sage 200. So that's kind of graphical, drillable reports. The 3 areas of PanIntelligence are Pi Informs, Pi Sees, and Pi Knows, and that's kind of report and insights. So those areas are the ability to see the dashboards that we're going to look at today, the ability to schedule those dashboards and reports and get them delivered to yourself and other people in the business, but also the potential to kind of go one step further and go into analytics and predicting outcomes and probabilities of certain bits of data. It's an easy to use self-service dashboard. You're going to see that today. There's over 250 dashboards on this, or reports on this, that are pre-configured for Sage 200. So it is just plug and play effectively. So if you're happy with the functionality that's in the standard Sage 200 dashboard, we can plug that in, link it up to your data, and it's good to go. With all that drill down functionality, there is report scheduling, as I've mentioned, the ability to connect into multiple databases, which Stephen's going to touch on as he goes through his presentation. And yeah, there's that whole kind of analytics that you could look to move to in the future. As I've said before, buy don't build. So all of these configured reports mean that it's a really quick setup time. We can get it installed, implemented, some basic training on it, and you're up and running. So what we tend to find is the kind of go to market, or the way this is kind of run into businesses, is we get it installed, get you up and running with the standard dashboards, give you some training on how to use it, and then we leave it with you for a period of time so you can understand what the solution is actually giving to the business. We can then build extra dashboards and reports as needed following that in some follow-up sessions. It can be connected into any other software applications you've got, providing they've kind of got a database backend or a way to pull that data out, as well as Excel. One of the case studies that we're going to talk about after the demonstration, they've gone very heavy with Excel, and they're getting a lot of results from that. No data movement required. So a lot of BI solutions require you to effectively pull the data out and then push it into like a data warehouse, which means that you've then copied the data. If there's any changes, they don't always get reflected in the dashboarding solution. Whereas with PanIntelligence, it's on top of the Sage database. So if somebody makes a change in the Sage database and the dashboard refreshes, then it's going to reflect those changes. And we can obviously lock it down to what information people can see in there as well. So, why would you add PanIntelligence as a solution to your stack or your business? Reduce admin. So yeah, you can obviously build those reports. A lot of reports that people are doing in Excel can effectively be manipulated and built through the database and then presented into the dashboarding solution. It means you're not having to spend hours a month doing kind of number crunching, complex Excel spreadsheets, and you can just get that data live and also drillable. You're not having to do any kind of manual manipulation of that data. You're reporting straight on that data that's sat in Sage 200. So, there's less human error, less errors in the data. You can obviously get good insights into the business. So especially if you're like a stock-based business, there's a lot of information that the dashboard can tell you that you can't get from the standard Sage functionality. You can obviously do month-on-month reporting, kind of look at your performance processes, and obviously, as I've said, connect into other data sources. So in terms of an implementation, as I've said, it's quite quick for us to get up and running, even more so now because with the solution, we've gone down the cloud route. So it's a hosted solution that we would put in as standard, which means that it doesn't have to be installed on the server. It can be installed straight into PanIntelligence's cloud. That means you get the latest software updates. There's no upgrade needed. Automatic license management. So if we add new licenses, then they're there. Limited on server space, it says obviously no problem, but also resources. These dashboards, once you get them built up quite beefy, they can be a little bit heavy on resource. By putting that into the cloud, you're not having an impact on the Sage server or needing a server to publish that externally. It's a bit more secure as well. So we've gone down that hosted solution so that you can effectively access your data anytime from anywhere. And so with that, I'm going to hand over to Stephen, who's on the call with us. He's going to introduce himself a little bit and then take us through the solution.
Thanks, Chris. I'm just going to share my screen so you can all see what I'm doing. Which one is it? It is, that's not helpful, that one. So hopefully you can all see a dashboard now. As Chris says, this is what we ship out of the box. I've added a few bits on to show you a few things that are quite specific, but broadly speaking, every customer gets this out of the box. And as you can see, I'll just quickly show you here, there's an awful lot of areas. I'm not going to go into every one of these today because it gets a bit tedious, me just showing you screen after screen after screen. I would say 70% of the people that we interact with on a Sage 200 basis, it's mainly sales stuff that they're interested in, and stock's probably the next most critical. So I'm just going to concentrate on those rather than going into the minutiae of project accounting or purchase order processing or something. But the general principle is we would install the dashboard, or as Chris says, fire it up in the cloud, point it to your Sage 200 database, and then you would get what you can see here out of the box. You can then remove the bits you don't like, or maybe you want to change them slightly. There's always slight changes. A lot of this, for example, is account manager focused, and we're assuming that's held on the customer in a certain analysis code. It may be that you're using a different analysis code. So there's usually a little bit of tweaking, but how far you go beyond that is up to you, really. But out of the box, this will all work as it's shown here today. So this particular screen, as the name implies, sorry, I should say it's browser based, so you don't need to install any software on the individual users. They literally just point to a URL, log on, which I'll show you in a little bit, and then you would be presented with this screen. So here we're showing high level information about the business, what our sales are for the year, debtors, creditors, average debtor days, etc., etc. Some of these charts, for example, this one, just move the thing out of the way, have drill down. You can tell they've got drill down because they've got a down arrow on them. So here I can see that Festival Homes are our leading customer for this financial year with £383,000 worth of sales. If I drill down on that, I can then see the breakdown of that by the different product groups. I can drill into a product group and go down to the individual invoices, and you could do the same thing on orders. And most businesses it's invoice values, but I know a lot of businesses it's the order values that they're keen on. So you can change these to do however you want. I can then drill up, and I could go down to a different product group. Go and look at lino, for example, how much lino we've sold to this particular customer, and then I can go straight to the top. All these charts, if you've got sufficient privileges, can be output in various ways: PowerPoint, Word, Excel, which only applies to data tables, PDF, or a CSV download. So if I do this one quickly as a PDF, you'll see that that is then available to me. Just take a little while. And then here I've now got top 10 customers as a PDF with my company's logo on it. You can also have access to other charts, because obviously, I mean, these are starting to get a little bit crowded on my little laptop screen anyway. You can access other charts via these buttons. So from there, I can go and see top 10 product groups, or top 10 customers, or top 10 products. And again, these all have drill down. That one's set to drill to full screen, so I can drill down right down to the screen. And because this is a data table, I've got an extra option here to export it to Excel. So you can always get the data out again if you want to after you've discovered it in the dashboard. If we go into a customer overview screen, so the sort of scenario here is you're just about to ring a customer, or maybe you're on site with them. You select the customer name here. So we'll select all things Black Kitchens, filter on it, and then all the information there is about that particular customer. You can see what their sales are, balance, how many days since they last ordered. These are their most recent orders. And again, these have drill downs. If I want to go and see what's on that live sales order, I can do. Or I can switch it to see if they say they've sent you a check and you say you haven't received it. You can click here and look on the most recent transactions for this particular customer. And then, you know, the next customer you ring or the next customer you visit, you just change the filter and you see the same data for that other customer. As I say, I'm not going to go into every single screen, but there's normal things like credit control. So it's an age debt list, for example, customers on stop, customer price lists. A lot of these have come out of things we've done for specific customers. And after I've got my head around how to do it, I've then built it into the standard dashboard. Drift analysis. This shows for a given customer things they used to order from you but haven't ordered recently. This is all 2018 data, so it's quite old. And then you can double click on the particular items and see when they last bought it. So this is using this chart here as a filter to filter the other charts on the page. So that's drift analysis. Customer drift is similar. Never bought, that's you go to a particular customer and you can see what things they have and haven't bought from you. As I say, though, a lot of what people are interested in is the sales side of things. So here's a typical sales. This particular bit is all invoice sales. A typical invoice sales screen. This is currently filtering on current financial year, but if I want, I could look at the last 90 days, or I could look at the last financial year, or I could switch it to all, and then from here, pick a specific date range. This is for the company as a whole, maybe if I was the sales director or the MD, but I can change it and just do it for a certain account manager if I wanted. Filter on that, and then it shows me the same figures, but just for the account manager, Jim Branning in this case. And then these cascade. So now I've chosen Jim Branning. Here I just get a list of his customers. So then if I was logged on as Jim Branning, I could choose a particular customer and see how they perform, although that then becomes not that different to the individual customer overview screen. And again, you can access different charts on here for different things. Split sales by cost center, department, product group, whatever you want, really. If at any point you decide that you want to get rid of this filtering, you can return the dashboard back to its default view, and it'll go back to the top level unfiltered display. I'll keep working down. Targets are obviously something that people are very keen on. So as I say here, there's no standard way in Sage of storing the targets, and there's so many different ways to do it. I know some people don't target on sales value, they target on margin, for example. Other people do it on orders, some people do it on invoices, etc., etc. So there's nothing out of the box that does targets, but this is just to give you an example of how easy it is. And this is getting the target from an Excel spreadsheet. And we can see here that the target for the year for the whole company is 9.941 million. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into the spreadsheet and make sure I change something for this year, so 2023, and I'll change Aidan O'Brien's to 5,500. Save that, and then if I refresh this, you can see the target for the year has gone up. And then if I refresh the whole thing, although you won't see the difference within those individually unless you were particularly keen-eyed on what Aidan O'Brien's prior target was. But it's then refreshed all that to pull the latest data from the spreadsheet. This is just showing each salesman how they performed against their target each month. And we've defined the color coding, which I'll show you how to build a chart from scratch in a minute, and then we'll see how the color coding can be done. We can see actual versus target. And again, if I wanted to just show this for an individual salesperson, I can do. The final bit I'm going to show you on this particular, the final two bits, are data that doesn't come from Sage. So arguably the targets don't come from Sage. Actually, no, the other thing I'll show you is I'll just quickly show you a profit and loss. So there's different ways to do the profit and loss. Some people want to do it monthly, but this is doing, you choose a period number, you choose a financial year, and then this shows year to date, budget year to date, and the variance. Same thing for period 10, and then the prior year up to period 10 compared with the variance for that, and then the same period last year and a variance on that. Key thing on this, which you can't do in a report, obviously, is that you can drill down on it. So if you want to know, for example, the breakdown of this rent and rates figure of 332,000 for the year to date, you can drill down on that, see the breakup by period, the breakdown by period, drill down on period 5, you can see the breakdown by different account names, and then if you go down to that, you can see the individual nominal journals or the invoices or whatever it is that's making up the individual transactions. So if you're querying a figure on a P&L, you can drill down to any of those figures and see what the minutiae is of what's making it up. If you just want to do it from a different period number, if you want to do it as that period 8, you can just select that. It is a little bit slow, this, and there are ways around that, but that's then showing the same thing, but as that period 8, and you could further reduce it by the cost center or the department, for example. And again, this can be printed out, it can be done as a PDF or whatever. Just got a bit of non-Sage data here. I'll actually do the timesheets first. So this is some timesheet data that's coming off a cloud application. And it's just showing how many hours people have booked in individual weeks relative to their contracted hours. And again, it's color coding it. But the key thing is that that's data that's not held in Sage at all. It's coming from a cloud hosted database. And there's a little bit of detail here about the different ways you can do that. And you can even embed iframes. If you can find a suitable iframe that shows you something you want to show, you know, how the S&P 500 is doing, or if you're doing a lot of import export, what the dollar exchange rate is, or the euro exchange rate, you can embed those in the dashboard as well. And then the other thing is just a marketing database. So again, this comes from my same spreadsheet, but it's a different tab, or a lot of it comes from the same spreadsheet. It's just a different tab. This shows you the number of tweets that you've done, what the number of shares are. It's working out the ratios. So again, it's calculating this figure in the dashboard, a bit like we calculate margin and things like that. The things that aren't necessarily held in the system, but the dashboard can do the calculation for you. And again, this data can be filtered on the campaign or whatever. Now, I mentioned that, and Chris mentioned as well, that you only see the data that you're allowed. There's 3 elements to the security, basically. First one is which parts of the dashboard at all you want to see. So if this is a salesperson, for example, you wouldn't give them access to the P&L. That would be one level of restriction. The other level of restriction is what actual rows of data you want people to see when they're logged on. So I'm just going to quickly log off. And I'm going to log in as Jim Branning. Exactly the same dashboard. All the screens that we see, well, first thing is we don't see all the screens because Jim doesn't have access to the P&L, for example, because he's a salesman. But also within here, they're exactly the same dashboards, but it's automatically filtering to only show me Jim's data. So I can only see Jim's customers on here. That's Jim's, sorry, well, this is a customer overview, but if I go into sales invoices and do the best one is probably that one. No, sorry. Yeah, this one. No, they're all only showing Jim's data, but it's not that this is the one I wanted. Right. So you can see there that it's automatically only showing me Jim's figures, and that's why these all add up, because it's automatically filtered the data on Jim. So if you've got 25 salespeople, you don't need to set them all up individually and filter all the charts. All you need to do is set up their user so they only see their own data. And increasingly, we're finding that more and more customers are actually sharing data with external parties. So we've got customers that are sharing outstanding orders with suppliers, for example, so they can say, well, these are the orders we think we've got with you, this is the date we're expecting them, these are the stock codes on them, this is the warehouse we want it delivered to, especially in a FMCG environment. And the same thing with sales. We've got customers who are actually sharing the database. You wouldn't want to share a database that share a dashboard with a customer that shows margin, for example, but you might show outstanding orders, what they need to do to hit a particular discount level, for example, things like that. So more and more customers are exposing the dashboard to people outside their own organizations. So here, if I select on account manager, I can only see Jim Branning. Here, I only see his customers. And you could do the same thing. It doesn't have to be on an account manager. It could be on anything you want. So it could be on a customer. It could be on a division, a geographical area, however you want to restrict the data. The other thing about Jim is that, oh, actually, I have given Jim permission to do everything. But if I wanted, I could have restricted what he could download, what he could create to Excel, for example. You don't want the salespeople walking off with a list of customers, for example. So it might be that you don't want them to download certain things to Excel. So you can turn that on and off per user. So I'll just go back and log in again as the admin user. Obviously, this is all stylable. You can have your own splash screens on there. Depending on, you can have a company logo or whatever. And the same applies to the PDFs and so on. Now, the other thing you can do, which again Chris mentioned, is reporting. So on Friday, I quickly created this report for my kitchen company and put a few of the existing charts in it. So that's, as you can see, you put pictures in there, you can put logos, you can change the text in here. So that's the first part, creating a report, and then you create a schedule. So this is my schedule, sending that report, and these are the people I sent it to. Now I sent it to Jim Branning, and I also sent it to myself. Now Jim Branning is actually set up with my email address. And if I go to my email, is my email shared? Can you just tell me, Chris, can you see my email?
Just no, only the pan screen at the minute.
Right, okay, let me just let me stop sharing and reshare and find Outlook. There it is. So this is the report that I sent. You may not see the PDFs. I can't keep stopping and starting sharing. Can you see that PDF?
No, just your emails at the minute.
I'll stop and start again. I'll tell you what, I'll share the screen. That should solve it. Can you see the PDF now? Yeah. So this is the PDF I sent to my email address, my freehand email address. So this is including all the figures, as we can see. And then the same thing went out. This is the one I sent to Jim. Jim's actually got my email address as well. That's how I received it. But exactly the same report. But we can see again, it's filtered it to only show Jim's margin, only show Jim's sales financial year to date, only show Jim's actual versus target, and only show Jim's level of sales attainment. So we've built one report. We've emailed it to different people and they get different results. So again, you don't have to keep building everything and build 5 things and filter them on each of your 25 different salesmen. You just build it once, and then providing the users are set up correctly, and I'll show you how we do that in a minute, they only get the data that applies to them. And again, same thing, you could do this with suppliers. You could send suppliers a list of outstanding purchase orders that are over the required date, for example. And as long as you set it up correctly, you could email all your suppliers automatically twice a week saying, these are the orders we've expected thus far that haven't arrived, for example. So I'm just going to quickly show you now how to build a chart from scratch. and then I'll show you a tiny bit of the administration side, the back end of the dashboard, how it works. Now, here on this particular page, if I didn't want to show debtor days on here, for example, I could remove that. If I didn't want to show over credit limit, I could remove that. I can resize any of the cells. And then if I decide that I've completely messed it up, what I can do is I can revert back to the default layout. So you can have as many or as few cells as you want on each page, and then you can choose what you want to show in those cells by just selecting the relevant chart or data table from the menu. So I can change that one now to show sales by product group, for example. Looks virtually unreadable, but you can actually then zoom it out and show it at full screen, filter on the product groups you're interested in, and so on. But what I'm actually going to do in this cell is create something from scratch, just to show you, fingers crossed, how easy it is. So I'm going to create a new chart here. Just call it Innov8. And the basis for most of the charts, data tables are slightly different, but the basis for most of the charts is you have a measure and a dimension. So what you're measuring, sales, and what you're measuring it by, month, for example. So I'm going to choose and you can see here, we can see all the different data sources that I've got initially. But what I actually want to do is select invoice value as my measure. And I make sure I choose the one from the sales, not from the purchase. And then here, if I type in month, we can see that it's only now showing things from the sales because each chart is limited to one data connection. And actually, that's not what I want to show. I want to show that. So that's it. At a very basic level, I've created sales per month, and I could, if I wanted, save that. It goes into the library. People can use it. But that's not very interesting, so let's just make this a little bit more useful. Let's create a filter on it. And we want to filter on the invoice date range, and we only want to see the current financial year. So straight away, that's making it a little bit more sensible. And let's change it to a stacked bar chart. Nothing will change initially because we haven't told it what we want to stack it by. But then let's stack it by the product group. So now we're starting to get a chart that's a little bit more useful. I can then say I want to show the data values, although that'll look quite crowded because it's a stacked bar chart, or I want to show the total values for each bar, which is slightly more useful, less cluttered. And as you can see, there's various other things you can do on here. You can move where the legends appear, change the labels, etc., etc. But what I actually want to do now is create the drill down, or the first level of drill down. So I click on here. Basically, that creates another chart, but it's a child of the preceding chart. So here I'm going to click on a given month, year, and a product group. So what might I want to show at the next level? I probably want to show the item code. And let's actually make this a data table. So although the top level is a stacked bar, I'm going to make this one a data table. That means you can then add a lot more data. So as well as item code, I want to show item description. And just to make sure that the numbers all stack up, I want to actually sum that invoice sales. And if I want to get really clever, which I always do, here we can type product group, and you have to get this exactly right, so it may well blow up in my face, but you can do product group description, and then you can say as at, yes, this one's probably going to go wrong. Anyway, invoice date dash on dash 1, 2, 3, 4, blah, blah. So I'll just make it full screen so we can see what's going on. So now if I click on freestanding gas in April 2018, I did type it right. So now this is telling me it's pulled through that value from the top level and it's showing me the makeup. Let's just make sure the numbers add up. Try a different one. So that is 832. Sorry, no, it's 46,609. Yes, so it's drilling down correctly, and then from that I could drill down and see what orders they were, what invoices they were on, or whatever, or I could add the number of units or the margin. Let's just do that quickly. So if I want to add an extra column in, I can do the invoice quantity, and we can add the margin. And normally you'd probably want the value as the last column. Actually, we'll have the margin as the last column. So you can change them, you can copy them. You know, very rarely when we actually get to doing an if we do an implementation for a customer at all, because a lot of them use the thing out of the box. But if we do, and they want something specific, quite often it's just easier to create an to grab an existing chart and edit it in the way that they want, because a lot of the work has already been done on another chart. So you would just take that and duplicate it and make the changes that are needed. So that shows how easy it is to build a chart from scratch. On the admin side, so this is where we're actually connecting to Sage, just to show you it's not smoke and mirrors. I'm using a variable. Let's do. Okay, I'm actually using a variable to make life slightly easier, but I've defined what this value is here. It's just so I don't need to enter it over and over again. But my particular database is on my machine, so it's localhost, the port number, what the username and password is, and what the name of the database is. I'm just using variables, so I don't need to enter it in all these different data connections. But that's how it's connecting to the Sage database. And as you can see, there's lots of other different types of database that we support. And then here is the metadata. So this is where we're actually connecting to the individual tables within the dashboard, within the database. And as Chris says, it's just a direct link to the Sage database. So if you change a value, if somebody puts an order on or puts a customer on stop, it's reflected immediately in the dashboard. And you can see the little squares and little hashes there, the dimensions and the measures that I mentioned earlier. You can take existing fields in Sage and do things with them that possibly sometimes Sage themselves never even envisaged. So you can do calculations on fields. So the invoice margin, for example, where are we? Invoice margin, percentage of sales, which probably is something they envisage, but we're just doing a calculation on that. You don't need to worry too much about that because it's already shipped. But if you've got a particular calculation you want to do yourselves, if you wanted to show sales values after commission or something like that, you could build the calculation in the dashboard, and then once you've built it once, it's available to use in as many charts as you want. I use that margin calculation there that I did 5-6 years ago. I just used it just now to build that other chart for us on the drill down. And it's the same with dates, for example. If you look at the invoice date here, I've actually formatted it in numerous different ways, depending exactly what I want to show. So I've got the invoice date, the actual date, and I've got it as the month, how many days ago, which is useful for filtering charts. Some of these you might never actually display on a chart, but you're just using them for filtering. So I can hard filter something to say only show me sales in the last 120 days. That's for looking at the previous year, format it as month, year, etc., etc. So you can build up a list of objects that are particular to your business and use those over and over again in charts. Regarding the user restrictions, so we logged on as Jim Branning and we saw that he only saw his data. So that's done via the user restriction here. So we've actually created 3 user restrictions because there's 3 different lots of data. And on each one, we said that you could only see Jim Branning. Now, it might be, if there was an area manager or something, you might do it on a department number. So if Jim was actually the department manager for Bespoke Kitchens, you could have removed those ones and filtered him on Bespoke Kitchens instead. So you're not restricted to the salesperson name. We don't want to save that. And then the final aspect of the dashboard in terms of security is which bits they can see. And again, I've done that here. So this, I clicked on here to say what bits of the dashboard Jim was able to see. It might be that I also wanted him to look at days sales of stock that was left, for example, in which case I could have clicked that. And then when he logged on, he would have seen that as well. Or maybe I wanted him to see the CRM information, which is more likely. I could have clicked on that. So you can precisely configure, even within a sales department, it might be that you don't want certain people to see certain bits of information. As long as the way you've laid out the dashboard, some people call them each of these an individual dashboard, we call them categories, but as long as you've configured these in the correct way, I'm going to go slow, there we go, then you can choose who sees what within, even within sales invoices, who's, you might not want one person to see the sales growth category, for example. You can turn that on and off for individual users. That's it really. I mean, as I say, we can look at every single dashboard and every single chart, but after a while you just get number overload. A lot of these are things we built for individual customers. We thought, oh, well, that's useful. And then we've put it into the standard. So all the time, every time somebody gets a new dashboard, they're gaining from work that we've done. They're gaining for free for work that we've done for previous customers. So this just shows day sales. And obviously, the specifics of how you wanted to calculate it might be different. But this says, OK, we've got 4 of these in stock. In the last 90 days, we've used 143. Therefore, on average, we're using 1.59 a day. Therefore, we've got 2.52 days worth of stock left of this particular washer dryer. And it might be that you want to look at the last 15 days, in which case it's very easy to change the calculation behind that and therefore change the day's stock figure. But as I say, the fundamentals of it are all there. It's very easy for you to change how you want to show things. Are there any questions? So the other thing I would say that I didn't mention is we have access to every single column and table in Sage, even the Sicon tables. So this is every single table in my particular Sage database, which I think is actually a 2022 one. But you can see there's every single table in Sage, including if you've got one of the Sicon add-ons, you see those as well. I haven't got those on mine, so I don't see them. But if I was, and then every single column within every single table. Now we haven't necessarily modeled all those in these metadata because it can get a bit overwhelming. Well, we certainly haven't modeled them all. But most customers are using the same core tables. But if you are using bill of materials or timesheets or something like that, you can access every single bit of data that's held in the Sage database. Sorry, right, that was just a little diversion. Any questions?
I've allowed Mike, so if anybody does have any questions, type in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves and ask any questions. If not, thanks very much for that, Stephen. I'm just going to jump back into the slide deck a second. Okay, so we're just going to skip through a little bit. I'm just going to talk about some existing customers that have had a lot of success with PanIntelligence, just to highlight what you can do with these solutions. So the 2 customers that we're going to just briefly talk about is Rakem and Cleveland Containers. 2 very different businesses that are both using the PanIntelligence dashboard to kind of elevate their business. So if we just take a look firstly at the Rakem Group then. So the Rakem Group have a number of businesses that are operating. They have HR, health and safety. They use Sage for their financial and some operational data. They have multiple systems and no way to kind of see a full company overview. It was quite disjointed. They couldn't really kind of pull all the data together. They were doing a lot of manual spreadsheets, and that was being done by a single person. So their monthly task was literally just pulling data out, merging it into spreadsheets. And by the time they'd done that, it was obviously out of date. It was taking them weeks and weeks to build these spreadsheets and these packs to send out, and then it was out of date by that point. And so that kind of meant that they couldn't see live information. Same with the board report, weeks and weeks to create. They then have meetings to discuss the data. And they had managers in the business kind of going through manually building their own reports to try and get their own data out. So when PanIntelligence was put in, it meant that they could see the data straight away from the live systems, which meant there was a single source of the truth. Nobody was having to build their own calculations, pulling their own figures from elsewhere. They could see all that information in real time. The board report was live, so if something had changed right up to the board meeting and they were looking right up to date, or if there had been some year-end adjustments made at that point, they could see that straight away. And so therefore, they were actually not looking to say, well, is this data right? Is this data wrong? They were looking and making decisions based on that data. That live access to data anywhere in the world, and non-Sage users as well. So previously people were having to go into Sage to run those reports, and they may have been having a full license or even a web user license just to go in and pull some reports of data out, whereas now they just needed a PanIntelligence data, and they had the knowledge and the kind of confidence that that was live, accurate information. It helped them do some marketing work, been able to merge that data together, look at trends and things like that. They do a lot of non-financial KPIs. A lot of that health and safety information that was mentioned is actually based on spreadsheets. So they keep those spreadsheets in a central location and constantly are keeping them updated, which means that they're constantly being reflected then on that dashboard. The targets, again, they can be, Sage 200 doesn't have somewhere to store targets for stock item sales, purchase targets, customer supplier targets. There's no fields in Sage to handle that. But by using Excel, they can store that information and then pull it in and merge it with the Sage information. So all they need to do is put the customer account number into a spreadsheet, the months along the top, the monthly target, and then they can merge that data in. We can join that data in so that they can then see the actuals versus budget or target for those customers and suppliers. Which means that the managers can then, see what's going on in real time and make decisions. Got a couple of quotes on there from Kieran from Rakem, how it's helped kind of him and the team see kind of live and outstanding orders, payment information, and comparisons year on year as well. And there was no kind of real training needed. It was point and click. Once the dashboards are built, those users aren't having to build the dashboards. They have users in the business, so that user that was building those spreadsheets month on month, she's pulled up and looked at the training and gone through a lot of enablement on this, and she can happily go through and configure these charts, reports, build her own now without needing to rely on us at Innov8 or PanIntelligence to do that. In the most part, she's happy to go and build those herself. Similarly with Cleveland Containers, so they're a different style of business. They are a business that hire out and sell containers, which actually over the past couple of years has been a booming business. More people needing to move stock around, hold stock, people run out of space. They had staff again creating their own reports. They had staff double entering into different systems. That was the Sage and the CRM system, because they were using CRM for kind of hire management and raising certain documents, and then that was being fed through into Sage 200, and sometimes it wasn't, so they were having to kind of enter the data manually into Sage 200 to reflect the bespoke CRM system. The end of month took longer than a month, which meant that by the time they'd finished one end of month, they were on to the next end of month and trying to pull all those reports together again, because they're having to pull it from those different systems. They have a number of depots up and down the country where they have containers held. They've obviously got all of the docks around the UK where they're receiving containers in. They've got containers in third-party locations where they don't have any control of those depots, and that they were kind of struggling to get all that information together. As I say, it was a bespoke CRM solution. So, we say that we can link into Sage. There's some Sage CRM connector data connections there that we can use. We can obviously hook into Sicon CRM, for example. These guys had a completely bespoke CRM solution that wasn't built on any particular platform. It was developed by a web development team, but it did have a SQL backend, albeit held in Azure in the cloud, and we could hook into that data to then pull real-time information out of that and merge that with the Sage 200 data. So the order book and sales report then meant that they could pull information from Sage, but also from that live CRM information as well. Previously, they were using Excel to manage that. They were using and updating a lot of information in Excel for container numbers that were shipped out. It's a very fast-moving industry where they have a little control. So, in the standard stock industry, you can go to a shelf and pick off an item and send that out to a customer, and which item you've sent out to a customer, and so that can be reflected on your on any reports in real time. With the containers, they don't quite have that luxury. So whilst they have different container types, when you go to a depot, you can't say, oh, well, I'll have that nice red one at the back under those other 50 containers. They get the front one. They don't get to choose which container they want to send somebody, which meant they were then having to rebuild all their order reports again to say, well, we've actually taken this box out of stock. Whereas by kind of merging that data where they're kind of bringing the box stock in versus the order book, they can get a better view of where their stock is and what's gone out as well. So again, looking at the benefits, you can see kind of decision making has come from PanIntelligence, sales KPIs from PanIntelligence as well. Reducing the month end, a real time view of the order book and stock levels, which was a big challenge. But then whilst that was kind of getting the business straight, I guess this was all challenges they had day to day, which meant they couldn't do all the nice to haves. Because they sorted the day to day, they could then start to look at the nice to haves. What do we actually want to report on? What does our MD, our owner, want to know? Well, it's actually, what kind of products are we selling? They've never really been able to look before and forward order. Well, we're going to need some more containers that are this size or that are single bar or double bar. They couldn't do that before because they were constantly just fighting with the day-to-day operation. And so by getting on top of that, it meant they could then sit back and say, okay, well, let's actually now use this for planning and KPI reporting, where we wouldn't even have thought of doing that before because we were just doing the day-to-day. Some of that, scheduling that we've got, weekly emails, KPIs across the wider business. And the massive thing is that data integrity. There's no manual data. It's all coming from the system. So thanks very much for joining us this morning, and for Stephen for giving us a really good presentation of the solution itself. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask them now. I have overrun very slightly, so thanks for sticking around. If not, then get in touch with your account manager. We can arrange a deeper dive demo discussions. You can have a look on the PanIntelligence website. There is a Pi for Sage page which talks all about the Sage dashboard. But also, if you go to try-pi.panintelligence.cloud, you can actually have a demo instance spun up that will link into the Sage demo data set effectively. It's all cloud hosted. If you do that, just get in touch with me or your account manager, because there is another login that it doesn't give you on the home screen. That's actually a finance login, and we'll give you that Sage dashboard. If you just log in with the standard dashboard, you'd be like, oh, this all looks like insurance. I think it is insurance values and things like that. So it might not be so relevant, but there is a finance login. So just get in touch and we can give you those details, or I'll send them out. So if we've got no questions, don't think there's anything in the chat. So I'll just double check.
Yeah. Have you got a price book?
We have got pricing. Yeah. So if you want to get in touch with your account manager, it's price based on users. And kind of what you want out the system. So we can give you a standard price for the standard implementation for a set number of users. And then if you want to look at other custom reports, we can do some consultancy prices off the back of that. Perfect. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, I will end the session there. Thanks again to Stephen for joining us. And yeah, any questions, let us know.